All right, Miss Rebecca, you are going to be streamed to about 600,000 incarcerated individuals.
Wow,
Yeah, let that sink in for fun.
that's a big number.
The big number. But what's interesting is when
Mhm.
every time I go in, my prayer on the way into prison is always the same. I just want to find the one that was asking for some guidance this week.
That's awesome.
That's my hope for this particular episode. So you're freezing in the Northeast.
Northeast. Yes, I am. Unfortunately so.
So true. So true. Tell the folks about yourself. What do you do on a daily basis? What's your passion?
Sure. So, I work in the lovely world of real estate, doing ground up developments and some leasing as well. And then I do some consulting work on the side too. So I've kind of got my hands in a little bit of everything. But yeah, that's what I spend my days doing.
And working out?
And working out. I love to work out. It's very it's my therapy.
Yes. Yes. Therapy thoughts at the bar. Different type
Mhm.
of bar.
Exactly. And it's so true though. It's like it is one of the best medicines in my opinion. It, really can help you just de-stress and get rid of some anxiety. And it's such a great alternative because when you're done you feel better than when you
Yes.
started versus other forms of therapy that you feel worse. So it's great.
So true. So true. No, I love it.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed watching your journey and getting to know you. You also have a show yourself.
I do. Born for Greatness. Yes, which you were nice enough to come on and be a guest for, which was awesome.
Was happy to. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
The idea.
The idea of Born for Greatness, that's
Yeah.
it actually I've always kind of believed that we are all born for greatness. It stems from my faith, and that I believe that we are all created for a purpose and that we are to find what that purpose is and live that out. But everybody, even the people who think that they're not worthy or they have nothing to give, are born for something wonderful. And you just have to figure out what that is so that you can let your light shine.
I love that. Have you figured out yours yet?
I think so, for the most part. I very much feel called to the brokenhearted. And I think that's why God's allowed me to kind of walk through some storms in my life. So that I could be relatable and reach out to people. It's always great to hear someone try to encourage you or give you words of wisdom. It's always wonderful, but it's often hard to really believe what they're saying if they haven't. I always say, if you haven't been down in the trenches with me, then it's going to be really hard for me to believe what you're saying means anything. But if you come down in those trenches and you've been there, you know what battle wounds look like. They might be different battle wounds, they might be worse or not as bad. I mean, it doesn't matter. At least you know what it's like to be in those trenches. And you know that you got out of it. So there's hope for me that I can get out of those trenches too.
Really gives you a place to speak from empathy,
Yes, very much so.
for sure. And it's interesting in the trenches, that's really where all the magic happens.
Hmm.
It
As
is.
very much.
Yeah.
Yep. Being refined in the fire, right? We talk about that. And that's a really hard thing, I think, for us to kind of comprehend and understand what that really means and why that's so significant. Because, it's like, well, why do I have to go through a storm? Why do I have to be beaten down in order to become, more resilient and harder? And for what purpose? Like, what purpose could that serve? I've been through some things in my life that have been very difficult for me. And I can remember specifically one incident that happened to me. And I thought if I prayed hard enough, God was going to rescue me from this situation. And I was praying and he didn't come. And I thought, that's it. I have built up this mountain of faith
Mm.
And in an instant, it came crumbling
Mm.
right in front of me. And I thought, this can't be. I guess he's not real. Like this can't be this good, loving God that I've read about. If suddenly my world has come crashing down. But what is interesting and what I learned later on was there was purpose in my pain. And that I think was the most significant thing which is so funny because you hear people talk about that, but until you've been through it, like all of a sudden it clicked. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm able to minister to all these people through what I've been through. And it's an
Yeah,
amazing thing.
it is an amazing thing. And so it's interesting. I'd be curious, as you've told your story. So oftentimes I'm tired of telling my story because I think I've been telling it for a decade plus, and I think I just go, oh, everybody knows it, and it's boring. And
I know.
I shouldn't say that. I take it for granted. And so I was at a dinner table about a month or so ago. There was a dozen folks at this table, and this gal said, "Hey, I want to know your story. And I've heard about it. I know bits and pieces, and Googled it, but." And so we dove deeper into it, and I can tell you that the one thing it gave everybody at the table was permission.
Mm,
It's like permission to be authentic. This gal
absolutely.
came and said, "Oh, what's your opinion on how I should deal with this with my child? What's your opinion on how I would deal with this broken relationship with my parents? How do I?" And it was just this opportunity for authenticity at the table. And I think that's what's
Mm,
so fun about telling the stories and relaying the storms that we've been through. It's it's really giving other people permission to open up, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and to hopefully help them heal.
absolutely.
Have you had any of those opportunities as you've told your story?
I have. I've had those moments where I've been able to really like sit down and relate to people and give them hope in situations that they felt were hopeless. And then I've also been given the opportunity to do it in a more subtle way on social media. And I'll just give you an example of something. I was driving home from dropping my kids off from school, and I often like that's kind of like one of my times that I am praying and talking to God, usually griping about the weather, mind you, telling him about how much I hate the cold or the lack of sun. And it was a stormy, cloudy day. And I was like, listen, you know what? It had been like 7 days with no sun. And I was like, I've had it. Like, I'm done. I need some sunshine. I need sunshine. Where is it? And he just gave me this, like, just everything made sense. And it was like, you know what? That's the sun still shining.
Mm,
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's gone. Just means there's something in its way. Like there's a temporary cloud, but the sun has never left. So whatever storm you're going through, the sun is there regardless. And for me, that was, because of my faith, I went, okay, God. So that means you're always there. I might not be able to always see you. I might not be able to always feel your presence. But just because there's a storm and I can't see you does not mean that you're not there. Because just like the sun is faithful to shine every morning, so are you in my life. And that was very profound. And so I immediately, made a video about it and threw it up on social media because even if, you don't have faith, it's still a true point, right? It's still a fact. The sun shines every single day, regardless. So
it's a great point to remember. Let's
yeah,
take let's take a left turn. Let's talk about social media since you brought it up.
yeah,
I think that when I watch your stories, I enjoy them because it's obviously I know you, and so I go, oh wow, that's actually her,
oh yeah,
right? So
yeah.
has that been tough? Like, was it tough to find your voice or your real personality, or is that just a natural
Mm.
thing for you to flip on the camera and go, here I am, world?
Well, so interestingly enough, and I hadn't shared this with you before, but when I was younger, I was in a band with my church, and we used to go around to local prisons and sing. And go figure, right? So it's just funny. Like I have been singing pretty much my entire life, mostly just to myself and my children now. But so as far as like being in front of crowds and at a stage, no problem. Being in front of the camera, no problem.
Yeah.
But suddenly, when you're staring at yourself on your phone, it's a whole different world. Like it was very strange for me in the beginning. But then I was like, I thought about it and I was, I don't want to be fake. Like there's nothing about me that really is, I'm not good at pretending to be something I'm not. So I'm just going to be myself
Mhm.
and, not make those edits. Like the other day when I don't know if you saw my story where I was like, oh, I'm so excited for Thanksgiving next year. And then I was like, really, really? Like next week, girlfriend, next week. So no, I think for the most part, it was a little bit of an adjustment and it was really just that, oh, I'm staring at myself. This is awkward. But getting past that, I was okay.
Some people find it to be so difficult and they start to critique themselves and then they just give up.
Oh, so true. And that's easy to do. But the fact of the matter is like people relate to real people, not fake people. So if you want to be relatable, you have no choice but to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
So I figured, why not? Love me, hate me. It's just me. So what am I going to do about it?
So
So
true. No, it is.
yes.
It's a great way to approach it. I love it. I don't want to skip over the refiner's fire.
Mm,
I want to skip over that. Are you comfortable diving into that? What I love about it,
sure.
and I'd love your perspective on it, is if the only way for those who aren't super familiar with what that phrase means, the only way to take the impurities out is to heat them up of this metal. And so there's this point where the fire reaches a perfect temperature and the impurities are removed from the metal. And different metals have different temperatures and can hold more heat, etc. And so what I enjoy about that particular refiner's fire is that in order to take down the fire after you've heated it up, you have to pour the water on it. But there's this perfect moment where you pour the water on it. It's not before, it's not after, it's not too hot, so
Hmm.
it doesn't have any effect on it and evaporates. It's not hot enough, so it doesn't bring the temperature down. So if we're using that whole thing as a metaphor, and you can dive in at any point that you want to elaborate on, I think that Christ is the refiner, and he himself knows
Mm,
exactly when we're in the middle of that fire, when we're in the middle of that trial, the storm, exactly when we need that water, when we need that balm of comfort.
that is so true. And I think it's hard when you're going through it because you always feel like this is it. I can't take anymore. Like this is my breaking point. If you don't step in now, I don't know what will happen. And oftentimes that's not the point. Like
Right.
like like that's where the fire's really starting to heat up and like that's where you're being really tested and I think where probably those impurities are being burned off. And usually I feel like when you get to that point, you are so close to the point where he's going to come in and say, "Okay, you know, it's time now. It's time to cool you down, right? Like you've reached the temperature I need you to be, and you've been able to burn off, maybe these things in your life that you didn't realize you had, or um, I feel like there's so many different ways that we're refined. And most of them are uncomfortable and awful,
Yes.
if we're gonna be honest, right?
Yep.
Like I've said it a million times. Like, if this is what it takes for me to get to where you want me to be, I'm gonna pass. Thanks, but no thanks. Gonna pass on this one. This is too uncomfortable. This hurts too much. I don't want to do it. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but if you can just make it to the other side, what lies on the other side is something so beautiful that it makes it all worth it.
Yeah. 1000%. I think that's
Hmm.
so true. It really is. I had a conversation with Rene Rodriguez, and he really challenged my thought process. He said, that the vast majority of life is to understand the suffering that you're going through.
Mm,
I was like,
interesting.
it took me a minute, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. And I think that too. So, one of a little bit more to the story that I was telling earlier about purpose for my pain, I had this moment where it all kind of came together for me. And like I was saying, I was looking at my situation and going, okay, like how could you stand beside me and not do anything? Like
Yes.
when I needed you the most, why were you not there? And he reminded me, like, but my son was on a cross for you. And I didn't intervene. And I'm looking at your situation just like that because I saw there was purpose for Christ's pain. There was purpose for him to be on that cross, and it made it worth the sacrifice. And to me, I was like, oh, okay. So you're seeing what I'm going through, not in a I want to leave you. I'm here. I'm just not intervening because something so much greater is is worth what's happening. So for me, that was a huge turning point in my life.
Something so much greater is at play, right?
Yeah, like you can't see it, but I can. And if you
Yeah,
just trust me on it, then there really is something beautiful to be had.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, as you've gone through all of this stuff, you've been through some exciting stuff. Talk to me about now. What brings you happiness now?
Oh, let's see what brings me besides my children. I am a writer. I love to write. I love to sing and working out. Those are like that's what does it for me, you know?
You want to
Pretty
talk about
simple.
anything you've been writing about?
Sure, yeah. So I have been writing my story. I actually started years ago and then I put it down and life got busy and didn't really think about it too much up until about like 6 months ago. I picked it back up. I met with another writer and she kind of gave me some guidance and direction. And so I've been writing my story in pieces, but it's a lot of it is like the things that I'm learning along the way too. So for instance, the thing about the storms, I put that into, my it will be a book, I guess, eventually. But
Yeah.
my my purpose and the point of this book is I'm hoping that when it's done and people pick it up, that they have hope. That's
Mm,
really all I'm looking is to give people hope for when they feel like they're in a situation that they can't get out of, that there is always hope and there's something to live for, and that there is greatness on the other side of so many tough things. And even if you have to, you're stuck in a situation where there might not be any light at the end of the tunnel, like I get that. Like I'm there with you. I was there in that fact that I saw I all I could see was a freight train. That was the only light I was seeing. And that's not the light I wanted to see coming at me. But
mhm.
yeah, there's hope for the hopeless. And I think that we have to do a better job of, you know, um, educating people and showing them that that is a true statement, because there really is, and that doesn't necessarily mean your situation is going to become 100% better, but there is always hope.
Yeah. I think that let's unpack that. I think that's what's interesting. So whether you're talking about religion or spirituality or just kind of changing your life, I get this oftentimes when I meet with folks inside. Like I gave this up, I gave that up.
Mm.
I'm trying to do the right things and it's getting no easier.
Mm. Yep. I think that I mean, I can remember I felt that way too, like, well, I've done X, Y, and Z, and you just kind of expect, well, okay, I've done these things, then everything else should just kind of fall into place now. And like there should be some form of completion to this difficulty that I'm going through. Um, but I don't think that that life is ever going to be easy.
Hmm.
You know, for some people it may appear that it's easy and it might be easier, but I don't think life is easy in general. And so I feel like we have to find whatever it is that grounds us and whatever it is that gets us up in the morning and gets us to believe that there is something
Hmm.
better in store, whether it's in this lifetime or not. No matter what you believe, there is some form of hope that tomorrow the sun's going to shine again.
Yes, so true. And I think when one of the things that we don't do, right? We both have little ones.
Hmm.
We don't want life to be hard for our kids.
No.
You don't want it to be that way, but boy, there's so much to be learned when life is hard.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, when it's easy, it's like, it's simple and your character doesn't like grow. You don't get again refined without some trials. And trials are awful and they suck,
Mhm.
but I think they're necessary because if we don't and everybody just kind of like had no problems, I think we'd be really shallow human beings. There'd be no depth to who we were.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the depth is what makes life fun. I don't think that, if you drew it like peaks and valleys on a chalkboard of if I get to this point, then I've got the house. If I get to that point, then I've got the body. If I get to this point, I have a
Hmm.
bank account. When you get to those things, what's interesting is it doesn't bring any more happiness.
No, and if you don't have valleys, then peaks don't really like do anything for you,
Mhm.
right? If it hasn't been dark when it's in its day, it's just like, this is how it always is. So I think you will learn to appreciate the good things and the good times when you haven't always been there. Like when you've been in that valley for a while, you can appreciate it so much more. It has more meaning.
Yes, 100%.
Hmm.
I think that's what life is about, is giving it meaning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to have something to live for. And you need to feel like you have a purpose. Again, it doesn't really matter what your background is. We're all born for greatness. We all have a purpose in this life, and it doesn't have to be big either. It can be, being a friend to someone who doesn't have a friend. Being that shoulder to cry on for someone that may seem insignificant to you, but what it could do for someone else is so huge. Like you don't know, you could be that cornerstone in someone's life that changes the trajectory of where they're going.
Mm,
Just because you didn't see it or you're not aware that it was you doesn't mean that you weren't the pivotal point.
man, that's so good to think about. It really
Hmm.
is. Really is. I think when I talk with most of when I speak with most of the folks, there's this portion that if you have if you have a story to tell that could impact someone else, it's really your obligation to tell it. The
It is.
sorrow, right? The sorrow, the pain, the journey, like all of that needs to be told because we think we're the only people suffering in silence or hating the fact that you can't see the sun and you're just depressed. Like I think that is what this life is about as we've gone through trials and struggles and storms and hell,
Hmm.
telling people that I went through it, but then giving them this opportunity on the other side to say, hey, here's what I've learned from all of these wonderful things that I went through. And I can only call them wonderful because, as you mentioned, I'm standing up here looking at the valley.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you really can't quite grasp or understand until you've been there. And I think it's hard for anybody who, like I said, I've been through several things, but that one thing that was very pivotal for me, that I spoke about, I was raped, and it's very hard to look back and think like something good can come from this. But I am here to say that there. there is something good that can come. There is hope. Now, if given the option to not go through that, probably would say I'd rather not. But I've been able to see firsthand that something good has come from it in the fact that I've been able to help other women who have been faced with the same awful thing. And I've given them kind of a view that life still goes on. You can still be happy. Um, you can still have a good life. You just have to heal from your trauma and deal with it.
I love that. Wow, I had no idea. Um, and to your point of what you said earlier, like if you're not in the trenches with me,
Mm-hmm.
right, it doesn't really come from a place of authenticity. So as you're talking to these other women who have experienced it, they've probably had counselors and therapists and friends and family members and all of the one-liner motivational quotes from social media, but
Yeah.
you were there. Like you get it.
Yeah.
That changes the delivery.
It does. It changes everything. It really does because I think there's also this bonding and this kind of this kind of community that you don't want to find yourself in, but if you have found yourself in, which I'm sure, with you and
Yeah.
working with the people that it's like, okay, you know what I've been through.
Yeah.
You understand what I've walked through. So immediately there's that connection. And it's just amazing what can come out of such terrible things.
Do you ever feel, because I do, so I'm not setting you up for a question, but do you ever feel that when you have a one-on-one with a woman who'd gone through that,
Hmm.
do you ever feel like you walk out like somebody just poured into you?
Yes.
Isn't that hard to explain?
Yes.
Like,
It's so hard to explain because you're the one who you're feeling like, well, I'm supposed to be
mhm.
leading you or guiding you. And all of a sudden they've somehow blessed you. And you're right. You come out of it and you're like, wait, what just happened? Like,
Right.
yeah. Like I had to sit and process and understand and to come out of something like that and feel so blessed by somebody else and their story or just, it's just, again, it's interesting because even though you've been there and you've been in circumstances, somebody else kind of sharing maybe their different perspective or the way they felt, it's huge. That's why, again, it's so important we share our stories because there are hurting people who need to know that there is life after pain and that they can get through things even when you feel like you can't or you can't heal and you'll never be healthy. That's not true. Those are lies.
Total lies. There's a guy in Florida. I'll have to introduce you to him. He'd be great on your show. Um, his name's Joseph, and he says he has a T-shirt that he sent to me actually, and he says when you hide your story, you hide God's glory.
Ooh, yes, I like that. Oh, that's
Pretty good.
awesome.
Right? It's pretty good. Yeah, that one I enjoyed. I think so. One thing that a lot of people that I deal with, the religion aspect or the
Mm,
spirituality. I think when I talk with guys and gals who've kind of hit rock bottom, right? You're sitting in a 10 by 12 concrete cell. There's not too
yeah.
much more, that can go wrong in your life. So you inevitably look upward, right? What can I do? What can I change? What can I become? And all those fun questions. And I think when we're out in society, there's this difference between the doctrine and the culture of
Mm,
of Christianity, of religion in general. I think the culture can be very harsh, can be very judgmental,
mhm,
can be very critical, and I think the doctrine goes back to the relationship, goes back to the actual man or the men that we look up to, that we read these scriptures about. And last year, when we did our convicted conference, I had a pastor, it was his church that we held it at, and he gave me the greatest one liner ever. He's been a pastor 50 years at the same church, and him and his wife
wow.
built it. I know, married 50 years. and pastored the church 50 years, same year they started. And he said, Travis, I want you to remember that the Bible is just a collection of the greatest sinners that could tell a story.
I mean, so true, right?
Right?
So true. And we don't
So
think of it that
true.
way.
So
Yeah.
true.
Wow.
So I'd be curious your opinion. I know I threw a lot out there, but the doctrine versus the culture. I think a lot of people, and maybe you've had this with the women or the folks that you've mentored, people kind of get lost in that. I'm going to get judged. I'm going to get ridiculed. I'm going to get made fun of. Like, how do we get
Yeah.
over that hurdle to have that relationship that you and I both know you have to have?
I think that that's just it can be so difficult because again, like you said, the culture is tough, right? And especially if you no matter what you've been through, you are I'm going to say most likely carrying a pretty substantial amount of shame. And that's something that like I have dealt with and I work with people who have a lot of shame. And I don't think we realize sometimes the impact that it has on us and how deeply our wounds are and how they can be. I feel like shame just penetrates deep, right? It really gets in there and it makes you just feel awful. And when you're already up against that, right, no matter what situation you've been in, and you have these people who are out there claiming to be these people that have faith and live this so-called lifestyle, they are intimidating. They are judgmental, like you said. And what I find interesting is like, and I truly believe, like, we who are here, we're not here to judge. Like, that's not our job. My job and what I believe my job is to love and to love on you. And I will love on you no matter what. I don't care if you, I mean, I don't care. I don't care what you've done. I don't care how you associate any of that. That's not my job. I don't know. I just want to love on you. Like, that's all that matters. And that's what we need to be showcasing because if we look at and you study scripture, that's what Jesus did. He wasn't condemning people. He wasn't going, oh, you and your sin. Well, let's talk about that one. That wasn't who he was. He sat with sinners. He cared for people. When other people, other Christians were calling out, like the woman who had committed adultery and let's stone her. And God is like, which one of you hasn't done a sin? Because if you haven't sinned, then feel free to throw the first stone. And they're all like, and he wasn't then, all right, now in private, we're going to have this conversation about how you're an awful human. Like, it was like, no, just go and sin no more. Right. Like that. I think we have to really pay attention to that because we are sending a message to non-believers that God is this, fiery brimstone God that has no love and compassion for his people and that he cares about the little things. We're missing the entire just exactly who Christ is. We are missing that in his character. And we're overseeing that and going straight to an outlook of, well, if you do this, then you don't deserve that. None of us deserve it. Let's get that straight.
Yeah.
And none of us are not guilty. We're all guilty. So why don't we just work on loving people? Love changes everything. That's why the Bible says, above all, the greatest is love. And I just think we got to be better. We got to be better.
I love that. I love that. Good stuff. Um, where can we find your podcast and how can people reach out to you if they've got a question, if they need help, if they
Yeah,
need mentorship? How can they find you?
absolutely. So my podcast is Born for Greatness. You can find it anywhere you can stream podcasts. And then you can find me on social media, Rebecca Matulonis, which the last name is tough. So it's Matulonis. And yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to chat with you and encourage you and hopefully be a blessing to you.
I love that. Well, you've been a blessing to me and to
Thank
countless
you.
thousands. So I'm grateful for your time
Thank
today.
you. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Heck yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully the sun comes out.
Yes.